So for the past 3 years, I've been working in Rome, based at Sant'Anselmo, the Benedictine headquarters, but working during the day in one of the Vatican offices, the Dicastery for Promoting Christian Unity. And in that role, I often had the privilege of escorting ecumenical guests to the Vatican and ecumenical guests to papal celebrations. And in fact, the last time that I saw Pope Francis in person was Palm Sunday. The Mass was outside in the square, presided over by one of the cardinals. But at the very end, Pope Francis surprised everyone by appearing just after communion, and he did a little tour around in his wheelchair, and I was in the front row with a visiting Anglican bishop, and so we got to greet him very briefly. And of course, he did the same on Easter Sunday. I wasn't there on Easter Sunday. I was with the brethren in Sant'Anselmo. And then on Easter Monday morning, we got the news that he had died. Ironically, I got the news from Ireland. Somebody who had heard it on the news in Ireland texted me and said, "Can this be true?" And I thought it wasn't, but of course, very clearly, after a while, it became obvious that it was true. So even though he had been very ill for a long time, it was still quite a shock because he had seemed to be recovering very slowly. We weren't sure how well he was going to get, but we certainly did not think that he was near the end. But such is the way it is, and for him it was very special to be able to give the blessing on Easter Sunday, the Urbi et Orbi blessing. So he saw the people of God one last time, and then he was able to go in peace, as it were. So in Vatican offices, most work stops when the Pope dies because the prefects all lose their jobs, so effectively for the period of the interregnum, the vacancy, and so only very routine business can be done. But in our office, it became quite busy because, being the dicastery that deals with the other Christian churches, we had to deal with lots of communications from our ecumenical partners from all around the world. First of all, expressing sympathy and writing formal letters of sympathy to the College of Cardinals. But then, as the days of the funeral came closer, we had to begin to organise how to receive and welcome the many ecumenical guests. And it really was extraordinary. We had, I think in the end, over 100 ecumenical guests sitting up on the raised area in St. Peter's Square beside the concelebrating bishop, so in a very significant place of honour, considering the many hundreds of thousands of people who were present. The ecumenical patriarch, the Archbishop of Constantinople, was in the very front, sitting out on his own a little bit. But there were heads of other churches, of the Assyrian Church of the East, of the Armenian Apostolic Church, of the Syrian Orthodox Church, and then lots of heads of world communions, the worldwide heads of the Reformed churches, the Methodist churches, the Archbishop of York, and a number of primates on behalf of the Anglican Communion, the General of the Salvation Army. So the entire Christian family joined us in Rome in those days to mourn with us, to honour Pope Francis, to give thanks for his ministry. So it was very moving. In many ways, the papacy is one of the things that divides Christians, but we had a real sense of all these varied Christians from absolutely every tradition, recognising the very significant role, not just of Pope Francis personally, but of the papacy, of the role of the Bishop of Rome. And so they wanted to be with us in those days. So we had some very moving experiences because it was very busy, because we had to receive them at the airport and bring them, in many cases, bring them in to St. Peter's by the side door so they didn't have to queue, so they could pay their respects at the Pope's coffin and bring them to their hotel. On the day of the funeral itself, it was like a military operation. In fact, it literally was, because there was a lot of armed presence around. And we gathered all of our ecumenical guests, both those who had travelled from outside Italy and those from local representatives, and we gathered them all at a hotel a little distance away, and kind of arrived in convoy in 3 big buses to the Vatican to be present for the funeral mass. So very moving few days. And in the middle of all that, I ended up doing a little bit of extra running around to help some of the journalists, particularly from Ireland and Britain, who showed up.
Martin, we spoke to you on Monday on 6/1, just the evening after the sad news of the Pope's death. What have the last few days been like here in Rome?
Well, pretty busy, as you can imagine. I found, just after I left you on Monday evening, I came down onto the square and there was a rosary about to start, so I stayed for it. And even at that stage, where the news was still new and there'd be no announcements of events, but the square was full. And there's been rosary here and at St. Mary Major's the last couple of nights.
Well, Luminit, tá Farrell as Aidin on Tahid Martin Browne as Condan Claude, Far an Rahaquido in Tachtin maar is effe go se die kaistir eintocht Christi a chud chun cín. Sin rin go chuid an curia in seo, sin an stát vi se an seo sa Vatican. Gur míle mahad ahead fri Berlin e de glóir te trúna.
Is brad an bheilih.
Inis chum das bode, tá se angraach chun tachtin seo, Ceir tar bonetse.
Wel, cinnta táid gnáach fí mar hiag fá tá Christathe ceannaí na aglaise fad beagnach fud an dain ag teachtaí an roimh de seachtainna seo. Ceannaí na haglaise gréagach, na haglaisí étóipach, na haglaisí Anglicánach, na haglaisí methodistach, na haglaisí fad.
Agus a tusa I gagrú
Well, some people thought Francis was too progressive, some thought he was too conservative, which is probably a sign that he was trying to hold some kind of middle ground and not end up on an extreme.
We've been talking already this morning to people who say they want to return to a more conservative church, a return to Latin Mass as a given. Your thoughts?
I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't think that would be a natural development. No. Sometimes just being stopped randomly in the street by reporters, and in fact if one was to answer everybody who stopped you, you'd never get to work at all. But I was able to help a little bit with the Irish TV and radio and Irish language TV and radio, and I was glad to be able to be. There are lots of Irish people in Rome, but it was helpful to be one that was reasonably close to what was happening and was able to give a little insight for people at home, and I know it was appreciated. It was a slightly hectic and crazy added thing on top of all the things we were doing at work, but I was very glad to be able to do it. Then we had a little bit of quietness for a little while, and then of course the time came for the conclave, and that's a little bit harder to work around because we didn't know how long it would take. We didn't know when there would be a result. We didn't know when the inauguration of the new pontificate would be. But once again, we did our best to keep in touch with our ecumenical partners, and once again I ended up doing a lot of assisting with media, and ended up being in the very strange position of being on the roof of the Augustinian General House, the headquarters where Pope Leo was once the general of the Minister General of the, or Prior General of the Augustinian Friars, and so this was the house he lived in for his 2 terms. Well, they're very near the Vatican, and so their roof was being used by lots of broadcasters. So I was with RTE, Irish TV, on the roof when it was announced, and we didn't have very good sound where we were because we were a little bit over from St. Peter's, but I had an earpiece, and so when I heard the Cardinal Protodeacon say his first name, that was Roberto Franciscum, I said, oh, that's Cardinal Prevost, and there was great running around among the people around me because he wasn't on their top 2 or 3 people that they'd learned lots of things about, so they had to go searching in their files, so I had to do a little bit of talking and filling in time. It was interesting that during those first few minutes after we heard who it was, the other person who was with me as a guest was the rector of the Irish College in Rome, who's a priest of Limerick Diocese. And as it happens, Pope Leo, when he was a bishop in Peru, sent some of his seminarians to study in the Irish College. So he'd visited the Irish College a number of times as a bishop, and in the previous year, when he was a cardinal, the prefect of the Dicastery for bishops, he came to the Irish College one evening for one of their community evenings and celebrated the Mass and had supper with the students and gave a talk and took questions. And in fact, one of the students who was there that night was also present, so he came up to talk about it too. So we were able to say more about the newly elected Pope than we had anticipated, which was very special and very moving to be able to have that connection, and to Irish people like to have a connection with people, and so to be able to have that connection with him, because despite being American, he doesn't claim to have any Irish blood, but we were able to make that link via the Irish College. Then, of course, we were back to work in the day job, and for the inauguration, once again, we had lots of ecumenical guests. I had wondered, would we have fewer? Because for a funeral, people wanted to come to pay their respects to Pope Francis personally, so I thought maybe there wouldn't be as big an ecumenical representation at the inauguration of Pope Leo. But in fact, there was almost as many leaders of lots of the historic churches, leaders of most of the historic communions, and leaders of quite a number of the newer religious movements. movements too. So all again with us, sharing in our joy. They shared our sorrow a few weeks previously, and then they were once again with us in a very hot and exposed spot in St. Peter's Square, as we witnessed Pope Leo assuming the pallium, the sign of his metropolitan authority, and the fisherman's ring, and it was just wonderful to be there for that, and to be joined by so many people. It was a huge crowd in the square once again, and we had a very lovely celebration with our ecumenical guests afterwards. And then the next day there was an audience. The Pope granted an audience to all the ecumenical guests, and so we all got to greet him individually, very briefly, but it was still nice to have a word with him and to assure him that we were working for him and praying for him. And so that was a very nice experience at the end of all the drama and excitement to be able to say, Holy Father, I'm praying for you.